5:31. Call the meeting to order. I see we don't have a agenda item for um, public comments. Did that get removed too?
That has been removed from most all of the agendas for city committees. So
Is there no real need?
uh, it's still at city council. That's the primary venue, and then planning commission for land use items.
Well, I noticed that we have a number of two in the audience. I just open up for member comments if there's any. Yeah, I will.
Appreciate that, Chair Rhodey. So I'm Brian Latta, the city manager. And just to add to the public comment, so state law doesn't requires meetings like this to be public, made available to the public. We record them and live stream them, but we're not required to accept public comment. And so some of the committees and commissions accepted it and others didn't. And so in order just to be uniform, we took public comments just off the agenda. That doesn't mean that you can't engage with the public, particularly on a topic that's on the agenda. We just didn't want to have like a public comment, kind of open mic night, come talk about whatever you want for 3 minutes. So that's what's been taken off of the agenda. But if you have a particular like a grant application or something that you wanted to a program you were creating and you wanted to get public feedback, you could always do that. Right. Yep. Right. And that's totally within your purview as a presiding officer to do that. So, yep.
Surprise.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that was a universal change that affected I think 2 or 3 of our boards and commissions. So well, that's not why I'm here, but just to give a little bit of context to that. So I'm here just on the behalf of the city of Dallas and the Dallas City Council as just a recognition of appreciation for your volunteer service to the city of Dallas. Each of you around the dais here volunteer your time and energy and efforts to contributing to the community. And that just is, I want to make sure that's recognized, that that we appreciate you, I appreciate you, our staff appreciates you, and the council appreciates you. And so many of you around this dais, kind of right in this ballpark, have been doing this for a long time. Shirley, if I'm not mistaken, you started with this urban renewal 2 years. Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. You've been doing this for a long time, decades, and that's amazing. And just great commitment, great dedication. Very grateful for that continued service. The commitment is just truly instrumental in the remarkable rehabilitation projects in our downtown. This last year, we have done 12 grant-funded projects in the city of Dallas in the downtown district, and that's incredible. Our community, I would rival it with other communities, other small communities like us. We look great. And it's because of the work that you guys do, the programs that you build, you develop, the work you did this last year with the grant programs and revising those. Looking forward to seeing that being super successful this next year. And that's because of the work that you do and the efforts that you guys put in. So just wanted to come and say thank you and just know that you're appreciated, grateful for the work you do. And just wanted to share that with you. And I'm going around to other boards and commissions and making sure that they know that they're appreciated and valued as well. So that's it.
You. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And
We love to help. So, but yeah, just appreciate you guys. So thank you. Yeah.
Move on to item number 2, which is consent agenda. Is there any discussion that we need to have any items removed from the consent agenda? Hearing none, do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
I move to approve consent agenda.
Second. Second by Penny, Marlene. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. Budget and grant reports on page 3.
I think this is going to be Charlie,
Consent agenda, no?
good agenda.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just getting ahead of myself here. Oh, it is. Okay. All right, staff reports. Who's going to do that today? Tyler, it looks like.
Yes. Thank you, Rich. Good evening, everyone. It's so glad to see you all here. The first report that I have for you all is just providing you an update on the 791 main project. And you'll note in the staff report, some language there written that's not going to necessarily reflect our verbal update tonight. And the big crux for that is we were expecting to be able to evaluate submitted qualifications this week. Unfortunately, at the end of the RFQ period, we did not receive any proposals. And so we talked with our consultant from Forum Placemaking today and kind of debriefed some potential reasons for why that was. And he did some research, and the trend that we're seeing with the lack of proposals is something that's fairly common for other cities that have done this recently. There's another community in the Portland metro area that ran a similar RFI period in the earlier in March, and that project only received one proposal, and that was for a larger site, arguably more attractive site. And so that's just a trend that we're seeing, and so we're in the middle of discussing next steps of what we could possibly do to move the project forward. And so many of those include possibly opening up another RFQ process, possibly having some more discussions with potential developers and figuring out what we can do to make the site more appetizing for them to submit a future proposal. But one thing that we also discussed was this could just be an issue of timing. And this is something that I won't take credit for. It was Charlie's analogy, but likening it to a job recruitment where you'll, fly a job position, maybe not get candidates you like or any candidates at all. And it's just the timing of it all. Because when you fly that job position at a later time in the year, you find the right candidate you're looking for. So that could be something that's possible. Something that we also discussed with our consultant is just the general economic and lending environment right now is really tight with how interest rates are still fairly high. And the Federal Reserve hasn't indicated that they're planning on cutting rates anytime soon. So that could lead to some issues with financing projects like this. And so that's one of those outside factors that are beyond our control when it comes to wanting to facilitate projects like this, as we can't control the lending environment. And then another thing as it relates to timing, a lot of the parties that had expressed interest in this had also let us know before the period ended that this might not be the right time because they have a lot on their plate, or another proposal for another project they had done was accepted. So again, we're in the process of evaluating what the next steps for this might look like. And so once we kind of have a bigger idea of what that is, we'll obviously provide you with some updates. And so we're definitely looking forward to continuing the conversation with developers. And again, if we have any other updates coming soon, we'll be sure to let you all know.
Ask a question of our resident expert, Tori. Are you having similar problems in Salem?
I would say, so we have a site that's committed with the developer, and there have been some things that have changed as far as what we have talked about with the development, because there are a lot of economic factors, some uncertainty in the marketplace. So yeah, I think it's probably a matter of timing. Probably waiting for things to get settled, and it's probably at a later date. It might work.
Watching the news quite a bit, and I'm seeing that a lot of the stock markets are doing great now. They're kicking up, but there's a lot of uncertainty about who's running the country? Is it the judicial system or the administrative branch that runs the government? Right now, I'm a little confused as to who's running our government. So that's probably a lot of people are having the same issues that we don't know what's going to happen. So I would recommend just having another opening. In fact, during the summertime might be the best time to do this too, because you're going to probably have more people out looking for projects and stuff. Question?
Incentives, when you had the RFQ, what were the city's incentives that offered, or were there any, like tax?
So the feedback we received from the agency, they essentially provided us kind of like a platter of potential incentives. Some of those include a land write down, which would be either discounting or giving the land to the developer. Some of those included potential SDC credits and other SDC write downs as well. And Charlie, help me remember some of these additional incentives. I'm drawing a blank.
Potentially doing something creative with the lodging tax, looking into programs like vertical housing development zone. I think that there might have been a couple of, there was a good list of potential incentives listed. So
I don't know how many people came when you did the tour or had interest, but did they say that our vision that we wanted for the property was holding them back in any way, that they would rather prefer to put it into residential or something?
So for the folks that attended the May 8th session, the feedback we received from them regarding the vision for the site was really positive. Now, when our consultant did reach out to some of the other development teams that he was talking to, one did indicate that a big part of the reason why they didn't submit was because of the agencies and the city's desired preference for a hotel on the site, and they're not a hotel developer. They're primarily a multifamily housing developer. But overall, the folks that did attend, for example, that May 8th session, they all were interested in what our vision was for the site. And some of those folks did provide feedback on why they didn't apply. Some of them didn't. And I can't remember who said what off the top of my head right now. But kind of generally, what that feedback was either timing issues, or just issues where they had another project that they were prioritizing over submitting for a new project.
Did anybody from any hotel reach out to discuss construction, hotel, motel chains, anything like that?
I know that some of the folks that were interested in submitting a proposal had reached out to some potential national chains, but they didn't receive any interest back from those folks. Yeah, so the next topic here is just a general update on some projects that are upcoming or currently happening in the urban renewal district here downtown. We're highlighting 3 here that we think are going to be some of the larger and more visible projects in the coming years. The first one is the Gale Hotel. The property that's located at 186 Southwest Court Street is currently under consideration to be sold to a multifamily developer out of the Salem area. And so they're currently going through contract on the purchase. The purchase hasn't yet been finalized, but what their plan is to maintain the commercial use on the ground floor of the bar and restaurant, and then begin rehabilitating those upper floors for market rate housing. And so they're still in the very preliminary stages of what they would like to look at with the project, but they've been in contact with us. They've been in contact with the fire department as well as the building department related to the issues on the second floor and third floor so that they can have a full idea of what needs to be remedied structurally before they can move forward. And so that's the one out of these three projects that is still in the very early stages, but we still wanted to provide an update, especially with how visible the Gale Hotel is on Court Street there. The next one is at 430 Main. This is the site of the former Seven Star gas station. And as you may have seen over the past week, they've begun the demolition process there, and that demolition is nearly complete. This is going to be developed into a multifamily apartment complex with a commercial use on the ground floor still being the gas station and convenience store. And the proposed development is currently under review by the building department. They're going through their process, but we're expecting construction on that to begin fairly soon here once those plans are approved. And then finally, what we have is just up the road from the gas station is 325 Main. You may know this as the site of the former Hong Kong restaurant and lounge. And this is undergoing the pre-planning process for the site to be redeveloped into a retail space that will house a nationally recognized auto parts store. The development team met about a week and a half ago with the city for a pre-application conference, and they're going to begin the formal process relatively soon. And so that is the update I have for kind of three larger projects that are happening downtown that will add additional taxable revenue to the district because of the size of what these developments would be.
As these are developed, will the aesthetics, I'm thinking particularly probably like the streetscaping, will that be brought into line to match how the downtown looks as well?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up. One thing that had been discussed with you all before, I believe a couple meetings ago, we're setting that standard for a commercial area. And so any sidewalks that would need to be redone as part of any of these developments would be would be required to meet that standard that was discussed here previously. But again, that's mainly if there's work that needs to be done to the sidewalks. Now, if the sidewalks are in good repair, then that work wouldn't necessarily happen then.
I think back in 2010 or something like that, when we were working on Main Street, we did bring up to the agency that we would want any properties that were redeveloped within the district to upgrade to the current standard for sidewalks, curbing, trees and stuff like that. So yeah, that should be followed, and I can't remember exactly when it was, but it was a number of years ago when we were working on the 900, 800, 900 blocks.
Yeah, I understand it would be silly financially to tear up something that's perfectly fine sidewalks and redo it just to match an aesthetic. But as these are large properties, they're within the district. I'm a little surprised that there wouldn't be some sort of like you mentioned, need to bring it somewhat into line, get closer to it, even if they don't have to redo it all.
That's something I can look into and report back on what the specifics of each of these plans would be. But generally, as I understand it, is the sidewalks are typically altered when they need to be. And Charlie, if I'm wrong, you can correct me on that. But that's as far as I understand it is, unless the sidewalks need to be upgraded or repaired, then generally they are not required.
And so it conforms with the remainder of the district. So I know the state's tearing up the streets too, or the corners to put in new ADA improvements, which I didn't understand why the ADA improvements that were made when we were doing the projects weren't up to standards. So, but that's neither here nor there because they're doing it. Yeah, that, I kind of figured that too. Uh, Anything else? Next.
Actually,
Oh.
one other question. It'll
Sure.
come up later because of the parking study, but I've been seeing some comments online, so I just have it addressed. Parking considerations for these. My understanding is the 7-star gas station that's going to be a multifamily unit has capacity and even a little bit over for the needed parking spaces on the property. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then obviously, I think the auto part that has parking space for it as well. So, okay. Yeah. And we'll get more into it in the next subject, but just wanted to bring that up. Thank you.
Hey, update on the downtown parking.
Thank you. So as you're all aware, in October of last year, we contracted with Studio Davis to conduct a parking study of the downtown urban renewal district, and you all as a body recommended that we do that. So we moved forward with that recommendation. It was approved by the agency. We allocated $20,000 to the study, and that's about what we spent. Now the study is complete. And so one thing that we're doing now is we've already spoken with the Buildings and Grounds Committee to garner their feedback on potential next steps. And now we're looking for ERDAC's feedback on some potential next steps. And we've highlighted some of these in the staff report here. So one potential option that we believe can be done in a relatively short time frame would be to reform and update the existing parking permit program that exists downtown. Stripe additional on-street parking where on-street parking is available but not striped like it is on Main Street. Adopt a naming and branding scheme for public parking areas and better identify those public parking areas. And then introduce a comprehensive wayfinding scheme for downtown visitors. So we believe that these 4 recommendations can be completed in a relatively quick time frame because staff believes they can be accomplished within existing department work or with the existence of other bodies and nonprofit groups. For example, I attended the design committee meeting of the Downtown Association last week, and they expressed an interest in wanting to have a role in the naming and branding scheme for any public parking areas. And that would be our preference is to work with a community partner like that because we believe that they'd have a better idea of how to appropriately name and brand these parking areas to meet the downtown historic theme, especially with the knowledge that exists on that committee. And then same thing with the downtown wayfinding. There is current wayfinding that exists, but our consultant believed that we can have that wayfinding improved in certain areas of the downtown to make it more palatable for folks to be able to park in underparked areas and be able to find their way to spots in downtown with upgraded wayfinding. And then, for example, parking space striping can be done during a time when Public Works is regularly restriping areas in the downtown. For example, they'll routinely restripe crosswalks in the downtown area before Dallas Days, particularly before the parade. And so that's work that we believe can be done within work that is already typically scheduled. The last part here related to parking permit programs. So the administration department, the city manager's office, already does issue parking variances to downtown residents and business owners. And so there's currently about 17 of those issued now. But we are the only city that our consultant found that doesn't assess any type of fee. And so one of the potential recommendations that was brought up was assessing some kind of fee for these variances and establishing a formal program that would assess a fee, limit the number of variances that can be issued per business or per household. Um, one potential one potential barrier to that was also identified is cities that do this also have a designated lot where permit holders would park, and that currently doesn't exist in the downtown area. We have three fully public parking lots and one quasi public parking lot. Um, but none of those would have the capacity to be able to fit everyone that we would require to get a permit to park. So that is one potential barrier that we'd have to overcome if we were to move forward with a more robust parking permit program. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't charge for permits. And you'll see under the fiscal impact that if we were to charge for these 17 variances, if we were to charge a yearly fee of $120, there'd be revenues of about $2,040, and that revenue could be reinvested into things like equipment for parking enforcement, or it can be essentially can be saved and banked if we wanted to do future improvements to parking in the downtown. And so again, what we're looking for today is not necessarily commitment from the body on action to take, but just a discussion of where you all believe those priorities are. And then based on the feedback we receive here and the feedback we receive from the Building and Grounds Committee, we would then explore potentially what are the things we'd want to tackle first as it relates to parking, to have some of these recommendations essentially worked on and acted on rather than just having them sit on a shelf for a number of years.
Parking lot, the county parking lot, it's public also?
So that's one of those lots that we would designate as quasi-public, because during business hours, the county reserves those spots for county employee parking. But they've indicated to us that after 5 p.m., if the public were to park there, they wouldn't necessarily tow or enforce on that. They have signage that indicates that it's employee parking, but not public parking. And that's something that we've considered is working with the county to potentially have that signed.
I noticed here that one of the proposals isn't parking either lane. I mean, we used to have 3-hour parking and when you get a ticket. And that's not one of the solutions here.
Yeah, and the reason why that wasn't a listed solution in the study was because with our code services team back to being fully staffed, one thing that will be changing is one of those team members is going to be doing more robust and proactive parking enforcement in the downtown. They've started that recently. And so the plan is for them to be more proactively enforcing that on a more regular basis, rather than has been in years past. So that is something that that we'll expect to see, and that's why it wasn't included, is because that was our plan going forward with a new hire in the code services department.
So if I have a parking variance, where can I park? Is that give me permission to park in these 2-hour spaces, or that's somewhere else?
Parking variance allows you to park in any timed parking spot in downtown, and you are waived from the time period. This is just what's been issued. The program doesn't currently have any formal rules on how many can be issued, a price, and so the city manager has set up internal policies for how they do that, but those aren't formal policies as part of any type of program.
Business has each of them potentially could buy this permit.
Yes, so there's no rules that prohibit that, but the city manager tends to try to limit that to 2 per business. That's what our code services folks have recommended. It is on just the blocks outside the immediate downtown. There's street parking that is untimed. And so that's typically where they've been recommended to park. I know another thing that some of the businesses do is they will have one parking variance for the owner and then another one that is swapped among employees.
City parking lot, is that metered or timed also, or is it open?
I believe they're all generally timed. I know the library lot is timed for 3-hour parking. Our quasi-public lot where employees park during the day and then after hours, I believe, is timed. For the weekends.
There's signage on that lot too.
Yes.
Indicates that it's open for parking.
Yes. And then the other 2 lots, the one by the EMS building and the one across the street on Washington Street in between Chevron, and that small commercial building there, those do not have time limits other than there is no overnight parking permitted.
Comments?
Yeah, I'll share my thoughts on the 4 ideas. When I'm thinking of that, looking, it's kind of a stage 1 out of all the different ideas that were presented or future ideas. I'm feeling though that the reforming of the permit program and the charging of fees is maybe a stage 1.B. I don't think it needs to be done right now. As I'm looking through the data and the parking statistics, there are some areas occasionally that get high into the 80% usage, but generally we're not really seeing a strain on the system. And so I'd hesitate to put on extra fees while we're not seeing a strain on the system, but have it in our back pocket for when our numbers will increase because our downtown's going to get more filled with businesses and people, then we can pull that out and have it ready to go. But I don't think we're ready for that yet. The other 3 ideas, though, the signage, the wayfinding, I think those are all good ideas. I'll admit, I look at the map and I still have to remember that those are public parking spaces myself. So I think those are good ideas and things that we could do right away and should do right away. And I love to hear that you said it was the Downtown Association is going to take on that. I think that's a great idea.
To piggyback that, saying is, if you start putting meters out, do that, creating a bureaucracy that maybe costs more than the revenue that we get from it. So I really would say that Trevor's idea is great because no sense of investing in something that's going to take more money to monitor and maintain
Than to put in parking meters, which some people are gonna abuse anyway, but it's gonna be costly to install parking meters and then have a bureaucracy in the city hall to handle the parking management of those meters and maintenance and everything else. So, yeah, I would hold off for doing any type of parking meter type of structure for the city. As Trevor pointed out, the needs are, although they're on some days high, it's not that high all the time.
Talking about like meters though, right? We're just talking about reforming the program. So people, business owners have a special permit where they can park in a 2-hour. And I mean, it makes sense to me to have them
That's
pay for
another thing,
that.
but they did talk about meters.
But yeah, I don't think meters is a good idea at all, but I do think that charging business owners for that permit makes a lot of sense. Cause I mean, otherwise, you know, you're not making anything on that spot, right? That spot's taking the whole day. And there's no reason why those employees who are going to be there all day, there's no reason for them to be in 2 hour parking anyways. But if they want to pay for it and we can get a couple bucks and push it forward, towards something else, signage, one of these other product or, projects would make sense. The only thing that I was wondering about as far as the wayfinding, we're talking about signage, right? Like business here, parking lot here, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so typically what we would probably put on the signage is more landmarks that would point people in the right direction. And the reason for that is businesses can come and go, and we don't want, and it would be difficult to make the investment for highlighting specific businesses on the signs and then having to go through the process of creating new signs if a businesses change out. So if you were to go on the corner of Jefferson and Court here, there's, I believe, a sign, I think they put it back, that indicates like police station, city hall, courthouse, those types of things. One way that we would probably expand that is perhaps put historic names of buildings on the signs rather than business names. So point people to where the old Carnegie Library is, things like that. That way, those are still landmarks. But they're still giving people a general idea of the way they want to head if they're looking for something specific.
So if we did want to do where it's a business specific, is that something that we could incorporate with, like the parking permit program where the business pays X amount per year or one-time fee to get that signage out there? Kind of gives them an advertisement, and it does advertise, businesses that are in here. And the other thing I was wondering is, are we going to extend this signage out to the highway to bring people in? Is that a possibility?
So the first part of your question, I think that's something that we can explore. Um, I know that there might be one other community that does it that way. I'm trying to think of who it might be. But as it relates to the highway signage, that's something that I've been working on for the 3 years I've been here. Unfortunately, the bureaucracy involved in that process is very difficult, and the laws and rules that the Department of Transportation has for those signs is very interesting, would be the word I want to use. And then also with that, it's a yearly cost to the business owner. And we just haven't had business owners that are able to incur that cost because a couple $100 a year to be able to have that sign installed and maintained on the highway. So that's why currently the signs you see are primarily for franchises of larger corporations because that's built into the corporate or franchise advertising budget. But that's something that we've worked on with the Chamber and Visitor Center to at least have a way for business owners to understand those rules. The unfortunate reality is those signs are just very expensive in the grand scheme of things for our smaller businesses.
It's interesting you bring that up. About 2005 or 2006, I started on that same thought. Why can't we get signage up on 99 to bring people into Dallas?
Let's
Well,
talk to one of the
And
farmers out there.
I got the same story.
Mhm.
You're hearing the same story that I heard when I brought it up as well. So, yeah, it's a joke in my opinion, but that's the way they play the game. I'm just wondering if there's a possibility, if you've looked into what their plans are for the roundabout and having some signage there that would help bring in more traffic from 99 into Dallas.
Yeah, we
Have you communicated with the DOT about that? And
Yeah, we did early on when we were going through the establishment of a historic district. We wanted to engage the Department of Transportation and the Travel Information Council early, knowing that that construction was there to make sure that signs pointing folks to the historic downtown could be installed in tandem with the construction work that they're doing. And we tried, going through the process early, making sure that it was ready. Unfortunately, what the Department of Transportation told us was we can't have a conversation about installing any signs until the district was actually official. So they weren't able to commit to that as part of their
Now that
plans.
it's established.
Now that it's established, we're going through the process with them.
Okay.
And so it's a matter of we've installed the signs that we need to install within city limits. Our public works crew is coordinating with the county to get additional signs installed. And then once we have those two things done, we'll be able to complete the application. And then so signage pointing folks to the historic district from Highway 99 will be installed. And then after that, we'll be able to work on signs from Highway 22. But that one's a bit harder of a feat just because of how ODOT has designated some of those exits. And so they need to be at designated exits, and some of the intersections that you think are designated exits are not. And so we're working with them to try to get that remedied.
I'm sorry, I just find it humorous that it's been almost 20 years since I started this myself, and it's still nowhere.
Write some letters.
Well, that happened, the city staff did that too, and it didn't pan out at all. So when we had the eclipse events going on too, there was a push to maybe do some signage on 99 to point people to Dallas to view the eclipse. Nah, they didn't want to do it. So
Is
it's
that something we can get from a private owner? I mean, because there's landowners all through there. Is that
well,
something?
the signage problem is that's a state highway. Yeah.
It's a much better route. It's just very frustrating. So we're not gonna give up.
Well, good luck, Charlie. The signage you were talking about are the blue signs where it brings people to McDonald's or Burger King or something like that. Yeah, that's where you're talking about the cost
Yes.
per year to do that. Because when you're coming down Highway 22 into going west, you see the blue signage, and I see every once in a while that it's just blue. And then pretty soon there'll be something that pops up and it's there for about a year, and then it's gone again. So
Yeah, the cost for just those small signs where it's just their logo, I believe, is between $350 and $450 a year. So again, that's just a cost that's a little too steep for some of our smaller businesses, unfortunately.
Even if we, I mean, take away the business, just do the historic buildings. You know what I mean? So we're not advertising for the business itself, but what's inside of Dallas, get people here, not so much for the business, but
Yeah, and we're ready and capable to pay for getting those signs installed. It's just a matter of going through the red tape and the bureaucratic steps that's necessary to get that done. And unfortunately, the Department of Transportation and Travel Information Council are very, very strict about their processes, and we have to meet every single point in that process before we can move on to the next step.
Arlene.
When it's here about the wayfinding signs, will the parking, once we do whatever we have to do, name them or whatever, will they show up on GPS? Because a lot of times when we were in England, all throughout England, they're parking in the village, it was a blue sign with P in white, and they were big, and so it popped up always on my GPS, so I would know where to park, and I looked for it continuously. So I don't know whether that just will come up automatically, like names of businesses do on GPS, or is that something that has to be maybe thought out?
So, so one thing, the process for that is either the mapping service will add it during their next update. And so Google and Apple are typically pretty good at that. But they also have a method for us to be able to manually add things like that. And so once that's something that we have, lots properly signed and named, that's something that we're able to pursue. And then businesses also are able to go in and manually update that. They just have to go to Google, go to the listing itself actually, and just request to be made an owner of their Google listing on a map, and they receive a postcard in the mail. They enter a code that's on the postcard. Google verifies that it's correct, and then they're able to edit the listing. Oh, I've had to in my past job, I had to do it for a fire station. It was tons of fun. Um, and so that's the process for that. And I believe for something like a parking lot, it would be similar. But Google and Apple do have a very simple process on getting things like that added.
Word there is named parking structure or parking lots. Right now, we have the county employee parking lot, which really is poorly named. It should be something like Jefferson Street Public Parking or something like that, where it stands out and it shows that it's public parking. The city parking lot, I don't know how that's named, if it has a name or not, but it should. And then it can be identified on Google or Apple, or under Chrome on their mapping system and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's process, but that's probably easier to do than getting signs up on 99.
If I could do the process now, I guarantee you I could do the process with Google faster than the
Bet you
Department of
could, yeah.
Transportation.
Any other comments?
I had one other question real quick. Does Dallas have a phone application or anything like that? Or is that something that we were going to explore maybe in the future? As far as a phone app you can pull up, it shows, events happening, parking locations, different historic buildings, stuff like that. Or is that kind of?
I know it's something that it's been explored. The issue with app development and maintenance is it's very expensive. And so I know that on the visitor center side, they explored kind of a Dallas visitor app. And I think the cost for that was north of $30,000 a year. To build, I think was about 10,000, and then maintaining it was around 30,000 a year. And so what we focused on is is trying to build the best mobile friendly version of those websites. And that's why if you go to the tourism website exploredallas.org, it's built to be very mobile friendly. And we worked with a professional firm to make sure of that. And then again, once we kind of have these parking lots named and things like that, that's something that we'll be including on that website as well, is where to park for events, those types of things.
Okay, let's move on to Charlie's. He's going to tell us what we're going to have money to spend on.
Rich, so the final staff report is just for your information. This is the current approved budget that's going to be scheduled for adoption by the city council and the agency on June 16th. It sailed through the budget committee on May 12th. Not a lot of new stuff or things you haven't seen before, but I did highlight three things for you to consider to look at. One is that the two grant programs are funded at the amounts that we've previously discussed. We're continuing to budget some funding for some of these other more discretionary line items, projects, professional services, and property acquisition. Though at this moment, there's nothing specific that's been identified for those three areas. And then lastly, this actually affected both of our urban renewal district budgets. We've tried to do a more accurate accounting of city staff time to apply those to the urban renewal fund budget so that we're not hitting the city's general fund with a lot of urban renewal related expenses for staff time. That's kind of the summary of it. If you have any questions, happy to try to answer them.
I had a question on the biennial budget.
Oh yeah, I didn't mention that part. So the city manager's vision is to, in 2 years, make all of the city's budgets biennial. This is kind of becoming a trend throughout Oregon with cities and counties to do biennial budgets as opposed to annual budgets. So we're kind of experimenting first, kind of the trial run, if you will, with just the two urban renewal fund budgets
The guinea
because
pigs?
of sorts, because it was an easy place to start because they're independent funds and they're not huge and they're not overly complex at the moment, so it made sense. And so far, it looks like it's working in terms of getting through the budget committee process. So yeah, unless something changes, I would expect this is going to be the format moving forward.
Yeah, are there, aside from that's kind of the general trend, are there any benefits or setbacks to doing a 2-year budget?
It's a great question. I don't think I'm qualified to answer that question, but it arguably makes it easier for your citizen volunteers because you're not convening as often to do your budget committee process. But I don't know. I just know that it's becoming common, and there's more cities and counties doing it, but I don't know all the reasons why.
We got stripped of this about 10 years ago. We used to do the budget for the urban renewal. And then it was taken away from us, so.
Well, so actually that was one of my questions. I'm curious why or what the reasons are that we're seeing the budget after it's been it's not approved by the council, but it's been approved by the budget committee. What's the reasoning for that? Is there any benefit to us seeing it before and being able to offer suggestions or adjustments at all?
So I could be wrong, but I thought we brought the draft budget to you a couple months ago before it went to the budget committee, but perhaps not. But I thought we did.
We've been stripped of that. The
Well,
budget committee does all
yeah.
of that for us, according to there was some processes that the agency went through to remove that from our consideration. And they,
You can be a recommendation.
we could make recommendations. We could make recommendations anytime during the year to,
And in some ways you
get
did
money
that
and stuff,
because
so that's not a big issue.
you provided the recommendations like for the grant programs, for example, what those should be funded at.
That's what
And
we've
so,
done. We've done that.
so you have recommended pieces of the budget.
Yes.
All I can say is that currently, throughout the city of Dallas, there aren't any advisory committees or bodies that are recommending budgets to the budget committee. It goes from staff to the budget committee to the council. That's just how it goes.
Can make recommendations during the year to fund smaller
Certainly,
projects. or
yeah,
something
certainly.
like
And again, just like I mentioned, like with the three discretionary items, I would envision that we would still routinely bring projects to you and say, hey, we're thinking about like the signage project for downtown parking, for example. Do you guys want to do that? Do you think it's a good project or historic signs or whatever? So while you're not necessarily recommending the whole budget through its process, you are involved in pieces and components of it. If you feel differently about that, we can certainly discuss it.
any kind of small projects that we recommend funding for, the agency usually rubber stamps those and they process them through, unless there's something glaring that somebody from the council is not really keen on. But that's very seldom. I don't think I've ever seen that happen. But yeah, we don't have to do a lot of the major budget, but we can do the smaller things. But the budget for the building acquisition or property acquisition, stuff like that, there's not much there because the city paid for it and then we're paying them back. They loaned us some money to do it. Now we're paying back that loan. Marlene?
$150,000 is all and stuff the first year, then the second year, there's no money, right? Is that
If-
how it works?
In theory, we could do it that way. That's not what we're recommending. but in theory, if you wanted to do that, and that's a good point because we'll have to see where we're at with this current new way we're doing those and those that application window, and we'll see. It'll be a good policy discussion. Perhaps is like if we get more than $75,000 worth of ask and if we deem them all worthy projects, we could exceed that in that first year at the expense of the second year's budget. But we don't know if that's going to be an issue or not. But in theory, yes, you have that funding allocation authority. Well, we could do, we could do a mid-cycle adjustment to the budget if things were really dramatically different from what we budgeted on the revenue side.
That again, we can provide input to the agency on too. So Charlie would bring it to us and then we discuss it and then make a
Right.
recommendation.
So if we had a windfall of, $100,000 that we didn't expect, that'd be a great discussion to have. I would love that discussion.
Sure, I'd like to see a paycheck. Get twice as much what I make now.
I'd just like to clarify, I don't believe we need to see it beforehand. It was just curious.
No, it's a valid question. And again, that's part of, the current administration here is how they want that process to work. And again, it's uniform across all of the other, boards and commissions that the city has, because there is another urban renewal advisory body for the South Dallas district. And, they're not doing anything differently than this body is in terms of the budget.
To build off Marlene's question, though, my understanding though is the budget is showing that each year has 75,000 for that program delineated. So if we were to want to draw more from year 2, that would be a whole process to amend the budget and make that possible. Or is it an easier process to kind of just move the money?
I understand exactly what you're asking, and I realize I don't know the answer to that.
The answer to that is we make a recommendation to the URA and then the agency then by magic gets money moved around from.
Well,
I don't know if
accounting might
yeah.
have to be involved and maybe even
Yeah.
public hearings depending on the percentage that's being moved.
Yeah, that's a great question, Trevor. It's my understanding it's an adopted 2-year budget. I think the reason you're seeing the 2 years shown, just so that it's kind of more of a detailed estimate of how the money's going to be, spent, because there could be cases where you're going to have a major project or expense in one year versus the other, and so you're showing that you're accounting for that. Our budget, the way it just kind of works out, we're basically budgeting the same amounts pretty much for both years, and so it just kind of looks like it's the same repeated.
I think the point is there's not the revenue. So unless the county is doing a biannual budget too, so you get the revenue from the taxing jurisdictions on an annual basis.
Right.
So you're anticipating it to be the same, and that's why it's
Right.
double for 2 years.
Yeah.
So to Trevor's point, it's not that you could over allocate. You'd probably have to monitor it so that you're keeping with.
You still have to watch what our
Yeah.
funding balance is, right? You couldn't exceed that. But we have
Had to request that the funding or the budgeting increase, the percentage increase. I think that's probably what you're.
No, I understand what Trevor's asking. He's asking but back to Marlene's question is, even though it looks like there's, 150,000 budgeted for the large improvement grants, and that's for 2 years, the question is, could you spend all that 150 in year 1? I think you probably could if the cash was available.
You could, but then
available.
again, during the year.
What's that?
If it's available.
If it's available, right?
Make a recommendation to the agency to have it put on a budget for the following year to bring it up.
Could we get some clarification on that? Because I think if that
Yeah.
were the case, there would need to be more eyes on projects that are being approved in year 1 because we would be taking away from year 2.
Yeah, and I think it's a hypothetical bridge right now that we may or may not cross, but it's a good question, and if Brian were still here, he could help us out with the answer to that. I don't know, but
That's
we'll
something
come
that we
back.
have control over too.
Yeah.
We've specified that the budget for the fiscal year 2025 to 26 is 75,000. And the city knows that. And so when they do these applications, they're not going to exceed that 75,000. Then at the start of fiscal year 2027, 28, or 26, 27, then they will pull that money, that 75,000 additional into the budget.
And that's our assumption going forward right now. But, since Marlene brings up a good point, I mean, like I said, you could find yourself in a situation where you have $100,000 worth of great projects in year one, and you will have a decision to make is, do we want to just stick to the 75, or do we push those other ones out into the future, or do we try to fund them all now? I mean, again, it's hypothetical. We don't know if we'll have that situation, but we'll come back with an answer.
There's if you look at the bottom of this list here, you have something called operating contingencies.
Mhm.
You know what that means?
Reuse, we can
That's-
use it
yeah.
wherever we need to.
We can make recommendations to pull money out of the contingency to put to a project or to one of the other categories. We would make that recommendation to the agency. The agency would then approve that, and they would just, bookkeeping wise, they just magically move that money around and that money would be
Right.
available.
And
So
that does
there's a
take
little
agent,
bit of
yeah.
different aspects to how the budget works and what we can do as a recommending body to the agency to make everything in the city continue on without having too many
Right.
interruptions.
Yes, and it would take agency action to move money out of contingency. That's
Yes,
that's
why we are
accurate.
Recommending money.
But this question is really unique to the biennial budget, which we haven't dealt with before. So I appreciate you bringing that up, and we'll do some research and come back with an answer.
Actually, it's really not a issue because we can, like I said, we can make recommendation to the agency to move money around out of the contingency.
Right, but you wouldn't need to move money out of contingency in theory if you had that full allocation for those 2 years. It's just a matter of moving it from one year to another. Whether or not that requires an agency action, that's the question I don't have the answer to.
That's a good one to answer,
Yeah.
or have answered. Yes.
Okay, one more question, I think. Digging in specific to one of the numbers, I don't know if you'll have the information on hand. The delinquent taxes, I'm curious, do we know, is that one tax slot or is that multiple tax
Oh,
slots?
it's multiple. They just kind of trickle in throughout the year. Our finance folks usually kind of spitball that number at the beginning of each year, and we kind of carry it over each year based on historical trends. It's usually not a lot, but it's always multiple property taxpayers that are in arrears, and I don't know why we keep it as a separate line item, but we just do in our accounting.
So,
What you do, because there's interest that's paid on that, and we get that interest as well. So there's this whole process of collecting the monies and stuff is really a challenge. I know I was there. I was in the beginning of the computerization of Polk County, and it was a fun time.
If you look historically, it's always been it's a relatively small percentage of the overall tax bill. It's like 1%.
do you know, are any of those, are any of the tax lots a recurring tax lot year
I've
to
never
year?
seen the actual
Okay.
data on
Okay.
tax lots. I just know that it's not just one taxpayer, but I don't receive that level of detail. I'd have to do that research to find out exactly who it is.
We don't need that.
By the way, you
Okay.
can go on to the county website, to the assessor's office, and the assessor's office and tax offices kind of work in combination to make sure that the public is made aware of these things, and you can actually pull that
You
information.
can find all that information online. You can find out who's delinquent
And
if you
you
wanted
can
to.
also, you
Yeah.
can also go to the county assessor and ask them directly. They're very receptive to helping out and answering questions. I've gone in and done that myself, and
It's all public record. Yeah.
the resources that you have available to you. And that might be helpful for the South District as well. When you start getting in there, it might be kind of interesting to see what kind of revenues you have available to you for that district. And you go in and actually get all of the monies that's coming in for that taxing district. Anybody else? I guess that's it.
right,
Thank you,
thank-
Charlie. Got any fun rides this summer?
Yeah.
Only 15?
Only 4 days.
Only 4 days?
To where?
You can stretch that out a little bit if you want.
Where are you going?
That was the last item on the staff reports, if I'm not mistaken. Member comments? Hearing none. Our next meeting, is on July 1st at 5:30. And I guess there's no issues with July 1st being a meeting date.
We may considering maybe canceling that unless we have something of substance to discuss.
Do we count that as attendance as present?
Because no,
Meeting is, we're all in attendance, right?
no, you guys are all right. And there was no meeting for you to be absent from, so.
Okay, well, super. Then in that case, I'm going to adjourn the meeting at 6:37.